Who wants to go next then?
I don't mind going next. I don't mind going next. Yeah, this album has absolutely no street cred whatsoever. I chose Well Said the Rocking Chair by Dean Friedman, which was released way back in 1978. I think it was his third album. And yeah, I'll tell you the reason why I kind of chose this album. It was back when I was studying in Aberdeen, one of my uncle's colleagues' relatives died, and rather than everything in the house getting taken to charity, there was a bit of a kind of free for all, and everybody just kind of went in and was allowed to kind of help themselves to whatever they wanted. So my uncle went in and managed to seize this big collection of vinyls, and then took them along to our halls of residence to see if they wanted any. And I just remember there was loads of crates, maybe about 5 or 6 crates of these vinyls, and it was full of stuff like Fleetwood Mac, Rumours, Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention, Burnt Wing Sandwich, Pink Floyd, the Eagles. I think it was Tubular Bells, the Exorcist soundtrack, just loads of weird and wonderful stuff. And this was in it. And I don't know, guys. I don't know if you guys have kind of seen the kind of cover art.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I thought it was going to be. I've got it to show you. It's became one of my prized possessions. I've given it one of these kind of plastic covers just so I can protect it. But I thought it was going to be a pretty trippy album. There's a kind of plasticine model of Dean Friedman there speaking to a chair with his face on it, and it really kind of took me by surprise, because when I got back to, so my uncle took the vinyl home back to the kind of family home, and he bought an old beat up record player for me to kind of play these vinyls on whenever I went home to visit my mum. I'll listen to Fleetwood Mac, Pink Floyd and all the rest of it, and put this on, and it really kind of took me by surprise, because it really wasn't what I was expecting. It's cheesy, it's cringy, but there's a lot of really good stuff in it. And I kind of felt as if it was almost a bit of a kind of melting pot of all those songs and musical genres that I was kind of listening to, or I had in this kind of crate of vinyl at the time. Like I said, there's a bit of kind of disco, there's a bit of funk, jazz, a bit of kind of musical theatre in there in the forms of the kind of deli song. S&M, which for my money is kind of akin to the likes of Bobby Brown Goes Down on the Shake Your Booty Zappa album. And I think it's expertly polished, expertly produced. There's a lot of work gone into it. And yeah, like I said, I played the shit out of it. And every time I went home to Keith, every time I went back to my mum's house, this is the album that I kind of reached for. And yeah, it was I suppose it was the album that I listened to most out of those collections of vinyls that I had until my mum moved home. So she moved out of the family home. So it kind of reminds me a bit about that. And that's kind of why I chose it.
I thought it was really cool. I hadn't heard of it before. I'd heard the name Dean Friedman, but I didn't know the album. It felt like I'd listened to a cult classic. I could tell that, because there's so much rich stuff in there. But it's for people who are willing to put the work in.
Totally.
It's for the weirdos and fringe lunatics, and it's not a straightforward album. It's for real heads, like you say. It's got a bit of all kinds of different genres in there. Amazing hard rock bits of electric guitar playing that just come out of nowhere. And you blow your face off, and then it goes back to the most mellow acoustic stuff. What's that song? I made a note, Shopping Bag Ladies. I think I love the acoustic guitar on that, and it's amazing. Because the singing is so technical as well. It's really all over the place and very accomplished. Yeah, it's right up my street. I think Tom would love this from WACO. I think it's like Steely Dan, and he loves that shit. So it's a great time for music with albums like this coming out. Wow.
I thought it was incredible. I love it. I've probably not heard it before, but it was it's great. It reminds me so much of Billy Joel. I love Billy Joel. It sounds like the Stranger album. Is that the album? Stranger. Which I love that album so much, and this album is similar in a lot of ways. He sings like Billy Joel for one, but he's kind of theatrical as well, and kind of and even some of the stuff, some of the, it's I hate to use the word quirky because it's a bit of a catch-all and it might not really make sense, but it's quirky in a kind of divine comedy. Do you know them? But that way, it's like a conversation between him and a woman, and and it's really what the fuck? It's so cool. I could hear a bit of Steely Dan in there, definitely. I could hear a bit of Billy Joel, a bit of Boz Scaggs, a bit of what else? I loved it. I could not get enough. I can't get enough of it. I'm really happy. And do you know what? I really wanted to, as a music geek, I really wanted to just go hard on finding out everything I could find out about Dean Friedman. But I wanted to ask you live on air, Grant. Tell me who's Dean Friedman and what's his deal? Where's he from? And
I think the third track on the album, Lucky Stars and Ariel. I don't know which album that's off of, but I think Lucky Stars is like his most well-known track. And I remember listening to this at the time, so listening to the first two tracks, which is Well Said, The Rocking Chair, and I think I've Had Enough. And then the third track, Lucky Stars, came on, and I was just like, what is this? But yeah, I think that's what he's best known for. I did actually try to do a wee bit of kind of research on the album just for the purposes of today, and couldn't find really all that much about the album. But, he went on and released, quite a few other albums after that. And I think he'd done a wee bit kind of TV and cinema. Interestingly, he wrote a song for, do you remember that program that used to be on, it's an American program, but I'm pretty sure it was shown on Channel 4, called Erie, Indiana?
Yeah, I love that show.
You remember that? Yeah. So he wrote a couple of tracks for that, which is pretty cool.
That's cool.
And he's still active now, I saw.
He's still active, yeah. So I think they he toured, I think it was like a 40th anniversary tour of this album, which would have been back in 2018, 5 years ago. So he's still on the go. But there's no way I would have listened to that. And in many respects, I think we kind of spoke about it before. Like back in the day, I very much just kind of stayed in my lane, and I would only really listen to punk. that was it, just kind of punk and rock music. And yeah, this kind of opened up a lot of kind of different avenues.
Nice.
As when we're speaking about kind of doing this podcast, I did say to Sneds, I was like, I could quite easily just give you, Come On, Pilgrim, Surfer Rosa, or Out Come the Wolves, or The Descent, or The Decline, rather. You know what I mean? But yeah, as I said, this album reminds me of the last few weeks or months, kind of living in the family.
Yeah,
it's important.
It's got like it's really power pop as well, I think, in a lot of ways, because I love it, like Nick Lowe. You know Nick Lowe?
Recognise his name.
He's cool, but it's kind of like, I read his book recently, and it was talking about it was all about post-punk, and they were saying like the stuff that came just after punk, he argues in the book, is like the most fertile ground for like experimentation, but in a kind of consensus pop way. So you have like the Specials, but you also have like Devo, and you also have Blondie and Slits, and you have Joe Jackson, and it's kind of like things got really, he argues in the book, things got really proggy and really kind of virtuoso in the mid-70s. And when punk came along, it kind of like scorched earth. But then people did go back to experimenting. People did go back to, pushing the boundaries, but it had a different, more pop sensibilities. And this, being from 1978, is a good example of that. Although it was kind of out when punk was out as well, you can see him being like, oh, I want to have hits, but I also want to do something quirky and something different. Yeah. And I want to, it's really power pop, I think. And I love power pop. I'm intrigued to hear what Sned's got to say about it.
I think it's like somebody said it was a really fertile kind of ground for like re-listening, because I've only really listened to this sort of a couple of times, one of which was in a car journey, and I was listening to it with my partner Kat, and we sort of got through it, and she was like, you could tell, Grant, that I think this is a 2 out of 10. So like, she really didn't like it. But I definitely need to listen to this a few more times. But there's some, like, that opening track is an absolute banger. And like Grant said, there's all sorts of sort of 70s kind of genres. But there's like stuff that sounds like, like the Copacabana, and there's like stuff that sounds like Fleetwood Mac crossed with Elton John. I suppose that kind of couples in with the sort of the pop element you're talking about, Jack, especially with this. I think it's some of the vocals and the sort of piano bits that sound a little bit like Elton John for me. And then there's the song I've Had Enough sounds a bit like the Police crossed with the Eagles. So there's all sorts of just quite nostalgic stuff for me on this, but I definitely haven't listened to it enough. I think I quite like it, but there's also some stuff on it that I find to be quite cringy. Like I think Lucky Stars is pretty cringy.
Lucky Stars is
like,
cringy.
It's a bit like Endless Love.
What's that one about the corned beef in the deli? That is a super song.
It's like a Amdram theatre performance.
Yeah.
There's a couple of songs that are like that, isn't it? So I think there's definitely some really cool stuff on here, and like loads and loads of variety. But I don't know if this will be like a classic for me. But I think I would like to listen to it a few more times, and just there's definitely going to be like that first song. I love it. And there are a couple others that I like as well, but for, like as an entire album, I'm not quite there with it yet. But it's a very, very interesting listen. I kind of find it funny to imagine Brad sitting listening to this.
I know,
rocking out.
I've actually had purple hair back in the day, so it's just
this is a secret album. The secret album no one knew you listened to.
It is a wee bit. Yeah, it's a bit of a guilty pleasure, but yeah, I'm not going to apologise for it.
Well said the rocking chair. It's been a while since I've seen such stark despair.
Did you see Lisa?
Yes, I saw Lisa.
Is that why you're angry?
I wasn't angry. The shopping bag ladies, they live in the terminal waiting room, patiently whiling where I was away. 4 a.m.
What do you have?
Well, I'm in the mood for a corned beef and rye.
It's not finished. It's finished.